On August 2017, hundreds of white men marched through the University of Virginia carrying torches, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." The next day, one of these racial agitators drove their car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing Heather Heyer and injuring dozens more. This incident shows that it wasn't just fringe extremists crawling out from underneath rocks. This was the inevitable result of a political strategy that's been building for decades, a strategy to make white supremacy mainstream by hiding it behind dog whistles, plausible deniability, and respectability politics. Hi, I'm Willow from OutCenter, and this is a video in our series about building a protocol for an inclusive future. We're breaking down a series of harmful worldviews, and in this video, we're going to be tackling white supremacy. Our communities face growing threats from toxic masculinity, Christian nationalism, and white supremacy. But we believe that there is a better path forward, found in gender liberation and equality, inclusive communities, and intersectionality. These principles offer a roadmap to a world where everyone can thrive. Learn more and get more resources at outcenter.org/protocol. White supremacy. It's not just the obvious kind marked by swastikas and white hoods, but the sophisticated, systemic kind that's been shaping American politics and targeting LGBTQ+ people for generations. Because until we understand how white supremacy actually works as a subversive political system, those of us who aren't awoken to its strategies will keep being caught off guard by its latest sneaky manifestations. White supremacy isn't just personal prejudice or individual hatred towards non-white communities. It's a comprehensive political and social system designed to maintain white dominance. White supremacy coalesced as an ideology during European colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. It wasn't just about economics, though it certainly served economic purposes. It was about creating a comprehensive worldview that could justify the unjustifiable, from genocide to slavery to systemic exploitation. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European and American intellectuals developed elaborate pseudoscientific theories to prove white supremacy. False, debunked so-called race science still exists today and is parroted by some of the most popular and ignorant podcasters and speakers on the internet. As Toni Morrison explains, American democracy depended on Black inequality to sustain white superiority. The benefits of the American dream were inevitably yoked to Africanism, she says. This wasn't accidental, it was structural. The Constitutional Compromise of 1787 counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation purposes, while denying them any political rights. The Supreme Court's 1857 Dred Scott decision ruled that American citizenship and the rights that come with it did not extend to people of Black African descent. The racists eventually lost multiple legal battles over the years, but white supremacy didn't end with slavery or Jim Crow. It merely adapted. That's why I'm talking about a kind of racism that's cloaked in dog whistles and plausible deniability. After the civil rights movement made some kinds of overt racism in some places politically unacceptable among some people, white supremacist politics went underground in some of the places that didn't accept it, to return nationally. How? Well, politicians couldn't say the quiet parts out loud anymore, so they developed what many people call dog whistles. Dog whistles are political messages that appear neutral on the surface, but trigger something like a different association underneath, in this case, racial associations. So if you've heard of people slyly talking about inner city crime or welfare queens or certain populations who need law and order to protect them, to protect real Americans, all of those function as racial code words. What type of person is being referenced by these things? Well, what's interesting is when critics call out the racism of these positions, politicians and other speakers can claim they never mentioned race. They can even accuse their critics of being the real racists for bringing up race in the first place, quote unquote. We see this constantly in contemporary politics. When politicians talk about election integrity while implementing voter suppression measures that disproportionately affect communities of color, that's a dog whistle. When they talk about parental rights while banning books about racism and what atrocities actually went on in American history, that's a dog whistle. The most successful dog whistles connect under the surface racial anxiety to other anxieties, usually about gender, sexuality, and other changing norms. One example of this coalescence is in the very dangerous example of one outpouring of white supremacist ideology in what is known as replacement theory. This conspiracy theory claims that white people are being deliberately replaced by people of color through immigration and multiculturalism, and also DEI. What's terrifying is how this fringe conspiracy theory has become mainstream in conservative talking points. Tucker Carlson repeatedly promoted replacement theory on Fox News, and he said, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots with new people, more obedient voters from the third world, they become hysterical because that's actually what's happening. The late Charlie Kirk has a long legacy of racist discourse. At the 2023 America Fest conference, Kirk said, "We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s, the act that, outlawed discrimination and protected voting rights." Speaking about MLK Jr., he said that as soon as King becomes idolized in Black communities, the progress of Black America goes sideways. Their cities disintegrate, their families collapse, educational progress stagnates. This great replacement theory and the wider racist allusions and references are all dangerous and have deadly consequences. The Buffalo shooter who killed 10 Black people in 2022 explicitly cited replacement theory. The Tree of Life synagogue shooter who killed 11 people accused Jewish organizations of facilitating an invasion of hostile invaders. And don't forget the words of those Charlottesville marchers who said, "Jews will not replace us." We need to understand the religious dimension of this as well. White supremacy in America has always been intertwined with a particular form of Christianity, what we call Christian nationalism. This is not about personal faith, it's about using Christianity as a weapon to maintain white, male, heterosexual dominance. See our videos on Christian nationalism and toxic masculinity to learn more. Christian nationalism combines several key elements. The belief that America is fundamentally a Christian nation. It includes opposition to church-state separation and the conviction that Christians should have a privileged status in law and society. But of course, it's not just any kind of Christianity. It's specifically this white, patriarchal, heteronormative version. This is, of course, where LGBTQ people come into the crosshairs. Christian nationalists see queer people and queer existence as a direct threat to their vision of a white Christian nationalist America. In their worldview, gender roles and sexual norms aren't just personal preferences, they're fundamental to maintaining this white supremacist social order. The dangerous aspect about this contemporary merging of white supremacy with Christian nationalism and toxic masculinity is that it can flow so easily between different audiences who are focused on their grievances and how DEI is taking away their opportunities supposedly, or how they're upset that trans people exist and they have to see them on the street. The extremists on podcast and YouTube start spouting more extreme stuff, and then media plays a crucial role in mainstreaming these extremist talking points. This creates a feedback loop. Extremist groups develop the talking points, other media amplify them, politicians adopt them, and then the extremists feel emboldened to continue escalating their actions. This is how the Overton window, that range of politically acceptable ideas, gets shifted in the white supremacist direction. When mainstream politicians use language that echo extremist talking points, they make more extreme positions seem reasonable by comparison. And that's not just conservative politicians, that's progressive ones that are becoming more and more friendly with this extremist attitude, or at least not condemning extremist attitudes. Well, why is this? Well, for some who hold progressive perspectives, even LGBT people, there may be a comfortability with whiteness. It provides social capital. It can provide privilege. There may be ways of being complicit in the culture of whiteness, even if one disagrees with neo-Nazis. We'll talk more about how our own communities must resist the appeals of unfair privileges in later videos on intersectionality. But know this, white supremacy is not going anywhere on its own. It's a sophisticated political system that adapts to changing circumstances. It survived the end of slavery, the civil rights movement, the election of a black president, and look where we are today. We're still dealing with abject racism and discrimination all over the place. What that means is that it will continue to survive and thrive unless we actively dismantle it. We're going to talk about first line of defense counter strategies now. First, we've said this before in other videos, but call out dog whistles explicitly. Be the person that says, "What did you mean by that? To whom are you referring?" It's okay to be a little bit annoying when somebody's trying to shift the Overton window in the name of plausible deniability. Don't let politicians or friends or family get away with that. Make these interconnections visible through conversation and community. Show how mainstream rhetoric enables extremist violence and how it normalizes the extreme to become mainstream. This is an important one for those doing coalition and advocacy work. It's time to center marginalized voices. Remember that white supremacy targets the most vulnerable first. And while your privilege may give you a position to speak, remember that your perspective isn't the one that is intersectionally being most damaged if you're white. So, rather than only relying on your instincts, which again may be built on privilege, actually pass the microphone to other people of different backgrounds to you. And speaking of building coalitions, build intersectional ones. White supremacy, capitalism, and heteropatriarchy are interconnected systems that require systemic solutions. And let me just make something really clear about this last point. Many white folks have engaged in neoliberal respectability politics for far too long and have chosen comfortability and safety and are very content to engage in political theater that placates rather than produces material change. Progressive groups may rightly be suspicious of white folks who haven't yet demonstrated a radical sense of allyship. So it's important to get to work to do the real work, the sacrificial work, the kind that takes you out of your comfort zone. So the next time that somebody tells you that racism is over, or that we should just ignore the extremists, or that politicians don't really mean what they're clearly communicating with dog whistles, or when even gay and even trans politicians pick the comfortability of whiteness by canonizing public figures who've left legacies of racism, remember that white supremacy has always depended upon co-conspirators. It's always depended on people not taking it seriously until it's too late. As I've said before, don't let the Overton window shift. The torches in Charlottesville weren't the beginning of something new. They were the logical outpouring of decades of mainstreaming white supremacist politics. Understanding this system is the first step in dismantling it. If you're learning from this content, please share it on social media. To help us keep these videos going, support us at outcenter.org/donate.